Think Viking raiders were all about bloodthirsty battles and plundering gold? Think they spent their days swinging axes and ignoring anything remotely sensual? Well, buckle up because you're about to discover that Viking sexuality was so wild, so ritualistic, and so absolutely unhinged that it makes modern hookup culture look like a monastery retreat. You're about to dive into the shocking world of Viking sexual practices that make Game of Thrones look like a family picnic. From funeral orgies featuring slave girls and multiple warriors to grooming rituals designed to seduce entire villages. These are the facts that will completely destroy everything you thought you knew about the Norse invaders. Spoiler alert, they weren't just raiding for treasure. They were raiding for love, lust, and lineage. They were fierce on the battlefield because of what they were doing off it. If this intro has you hooked, smash that like button and subscribe for more mind-blowing dives into dark history. Next up, we might tackle medieval knights' bedroom secrets. Let's start with one of the most horrific death rituals in human history, the Viking funeral orgy. Picture this. Your chieftain has just died in battle, and his warriors are preparing a massive ship burial. Great. Time for mourning and remembrance, right? Wrong. Time to select a slave girl to be gang-raped by the entire crew before being sacrificed to join her master in the afterlife. The Viking funeral orgy was the Norse equivalent of a deadly bachelor party, except way more brutal and with eternal stakes. Volunteer slave girls, often captives from raids, would be chosen to serve the dead chief in Valhalla, but first, they had to endure a public sexual gauntlet. According to eyewitness accounts from Arab traveler Ahmad ibn Fadlan, the girl would go from tent to tent, having intercourse with each warrior who would declare, "Tell your master I did this out of love for him." Because nothing says loyalty like forcing a woman into ritual sex before her murder. But here's where it gets truly insane. This wasn't just tolerated by Viking society, it was required for high-status burials. Families and clans would actually prepare the girl for days, getting her drunk on mead and singing songs to hype her up for the ordeal, thinking this was somehow an honorable send-off to the gods. It's like Viking leaders looked at the concept of afterlife companionship and said, "You know what? This needs more group violation and human sacrifice." The practice was so common that archaeological evidence from ship burials, like the Oseberg ship in Norway, shows elaborate preparations for these rituals, complete with sacrificed animals and riches to accompany the dead and their doomed concubine. We're talking about a Viking industry built around death, sex, and spectacle, where the cognitive dissonance of honoring the dead through horror is absolutely staggering. And surprise, surprise, this didn't exactly work as a smooth spiritual transition. Historical records from Ibn Fadlan describe the girl becoming increasingly distraught, needing to be forcibly dragged into the final act, where 6 men would hold her down for the last round of intercourse before the angel of death, an old woman, strangled her with a cord while stabbing her repeatedly. Who could have possibly seen the trauma coming? The best part, Christian chroniclers of the time were constantly horrified by these funerals, calling them pagan abominations, while simultaneously being unable to stop Viking expansions because the Norse were too busy conquering with their unbreakable warrior bonds. It's like the medieval equivalent of missionaries trying to ban rock music. Technically possible, but practically impossible. If you think Viking raids were just about looting monasteries, try imagining them as desperate quests for wives in a society starved for women. Welcome to Viking polygamy and concubinage, where one man could hoard multiple partners like treasure hoards. Picture this. You're a powerful Viking jarl with a thriving farmstead. But one wife isn't enough to show your status. Great. Time to raid Ireland for a few concubines to add to your collection. Wrong. Time to integrate them into your household as semi-official partners, complete with children who could inherit if you acknowledge them. Polygamy and concubinage were the Viking equivalent of a status symbol flex, except way more exploitative and with significantly higher drama. Wealthy men would take multiple wives or concubines, often slaves captured in raids, believing this boosted their lineage and power. Because nothing says dominance like fathering dozens of kids from a harem of unwilling women. But here's where it gets truly insane. This wasn't just tolerated by Viking laws, it was encouraged for the elite. Sagas like the Saga of the People of Vatnsdal describe kings and chieftains with concubines alongside their primary wives, thinking this was somehow a stable way to build dynasties. It's like Viking society looked at the concept of monogamy and said, you know what? This needs more jealousy, more heirs, and shared household chores. The practice was so common that special legal provisions existed for concubines' children, who could claim inheritance if the father recognized them, creating a Viking industry built around paternity disputes and estate divisions. We're talking about a society where the cognitive dissonance of treating women as property while granting them some rights is absolutely staggering. And surprise, surprise, polygamy didn't exactly work as intended. Historical records from the Laxdæla saga show skyrocketing jealousy, feuds, and murders among co-wives and concubines, with pregnancy rates fueling endless rivalries over heirs. Turns out that cramming multiple partners under one longhouse roof, even with social norms, doesn't actually prevent nature's drama from exploding. Who could have possibly seen that coming? The best part, religious leaders in Christianizing Scandinavia constantly railed against polygamy, calling it sinful and chaotic, while being unable to eradicate it because it was so deeply ingrained in elite culture. It's like the medieval equivalent of trying to ban reality TV. Technically possible, but practically impossible. Shocked by these Viking power plays? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We've got more wild history coming your way. Viking men didn't just conquer lands, they scheduled their dominance like a raid on enemy shores, complete with insults that could lead to duels over sexual roles. We're talking about a time when being urgy could get you killed faster than a battlefield wound. The Viking obsession with homosexuality taboos was based on a mix of honor, masculinity, and social doctrine that created the most complicated gay-shaming system in history. Men could penetrate other men to assert power, but being the passive partner? That was urgy. Unmanly, effeminate, cowardly, and it was outlawed. Picture this. You're a Viking warrior accused of being arger, the adjective for urgy, meaning you're willing to bottom. Great. Time for apologies, right? Wrong. Time to challenge the accuser to a home-gang duel, because insults like rassrager, arse unmanly, were killing words under laws like grogus. Because nothing says justice like fighting to the death over bedroom roles. But here's where it gets truly insane. This wasn't just tolerated by Vikings, it was codified in their things, the assembly courts. Sagas like Egil's saga describe end rituals, where scorn poles with horse heads were erected to publicly accuse someone of urgy, thinking this was somehow a fair way to settle disputes. It's like Viking society looked at the concept of sexual orientation and said, you know what? This needs more violence, more public shaming, and ritual carvings. The practice was so common that special terms like syskrati existed for men practicing cedar magic in receptive roles, building a Viking lexicon around preventing unmanliness. We're talking about a cultural industry built around masculinity tests, where the cognitive dissonance of gods like Odin being urgy practicing women's magic, while mortals couldn't is absolutely staggering. And surprise, surprise, these taboos didn't exactly work as intended. Mythological texts like Lokasenna show gods hurling urgy insults at each other without consequences, while human records from Sturlunga saga describe rapes of captives as humiliation, leading to more feuds than deterrence. Turns out that labeling passive homosexuality as cowardice, even with duels, doesn't actually prevent nature from taking its course. Who could have possibly seen that coming? The best part, post-Christian laws tried to ban all homosexuality, calling it sinful, while pagan Vikings focused only on the passive role, unable to fully suppress it because it was tied to power dynamics in raids. It's like the medieval equivalent of trying to police locker room talk. Technically possible, but practically impossible. If this twist on Viking masculinity blew your mind, like the video and subscribe for more. Share in the comments if you duel over an insult. Think modern breakups are messy? Try divorcing your Viking husband by citing his bedroom failures in front of the entire thing assembly. Welcome to Viking divorce for sexual dissatisfaction, where impotence was public business. The logic behind sex-based divorce was actually pretty straightforward in a completely insane Viking way. Marriage wasn't just about alliances, it was about heirs, and if a man couldn't perform, the union was invalid. And since Viking women had rights to property and dowry, they needed witnesses to prove the deed wasn't getting done. Because nothing says legally binding split like airing your sex life at a community court. The The process was elaborate and humiliating in equal measure. After complaints, the wife would gather witnesses, often family or neighbors, to testify about the husband's failures, like inability to consummate or leaving her unfulfilled for 3 years. The husband would be undressed publicly if needed to check for issues, because apparently Vikings believed in group inspections for divorce. Then came the main event. The wife would declare the divorce at the threshold of the home and the bed, while witnesses stood by. We're not talking about a quick filing. These declarations could involve detailed accounts of sexual shortcomings, sometimes with the husband defending himself. But wait, it gets worse. In some cases, witnesses would actually examine the couple's intimacy attempts, looking for proof of impotence like lack of erection or failure to satisfy. Imagine having to present your bedroom woes to a committee of elders like you're submitting evidence in a saga, which technically you were. The most insane part, this wasn't just for elite marriages. Any union could end over sexual incompatibility, with sagas like Laxdæla describing thousands of Viking women divorcing for neglect or poor performance. We're talking about women reclaiming dowries and property after public shaming their husbands. Some men tried to game the system by claiming curses or injuries, but court records from Gragas show cases where divorces were granted anyway, forcing the man to pay fines or lose status. The practice was so normalized that Viking etiquette included rules for handling these declarations, both for the couple and witnesses. There were guidelines on what to say, how to announce, and even how to avoid duels over the humiliation. Vikings turned bedroom failures into a formal social institution. Ready for more Viking shocks? Subscribe now and hit the bell. We drop new episodes weekly. Viking warriors didn't just pillage villages. They groomed like gods to seduce the locals, turning hygiene into a weapon of conquest. We're talking about a time when bathing weekly required more planning than a raid. The Viking obsession with grooming and seduction was based on a combination of vanity, status, and practical allure that created the most elaborate self-care routine in medieval Europe. Men would consult sagas for tips on appearance, believing clean hair and bright clothes pleased the gods like Freya. According to chronicles from John of Wallingford, Vikings combed daily, bathed every Saturday, and changed clothes often, because apparently Norse believed Odin's favor depended on looking sharp. Some texts recommended dyeing hair blonde during raids, thinking children groomed on feast days would be blessed with charisma. Imagine checking your reflection in a polished shield just to figure out if you're seduction ready. But the grooming obsession went way beyond just looking good. Vikings provided detailed instructions about optimal scents, using herbs, ideal weather for bathing, warm springs, and even the proper direction to face while combing north toward Asgard. Grooming became a logistical art, requiring more preparation than forging a sword. The seduction methods were absolutely bonkers. To attract a woman, men were instructed to slap her with purple flowers while reciting poetry. Yes, you read that correctly, because Vikings believed floral smacks signaled interest without urgy shame. The level of romantic ignorance required to believe this is truly staggering. Religious considerations made everything even more complicated. Pagan rituals prohibited grooming on certain days, like during blots and while raiding. Viking men had to navigate a minefield of taboos just to find time for a bath without offending Thor. Wealthy raiders would actually hire specialists, barbers with runes, to create personalized grooming schedules. These consultants would analyze the man's saga history, raid obligations, and god allegiances to determine optimal trim times. It's like Vikings invented spa apps, except with more superstition and significantly less soap accuracy. The pressure to seduce through grooming was so intense that some men would travel to hot springs in Iceland during raids for seduction baths, because apparently geothermal water boosted allure success. This grooming deep dive got you rethinking Vikings? Like, share, and subscribe for more. If you think modern witchcraft is edgy, try Viking Cedar Magic, where ritual sex blurred lines between power and taboo. Welcome to Cedar Rituals, where trance involved possible orgies. The logic behind sexual magic was straightforward in an insane Viking way. Cedar wasn't considered legally valid without ecstasy, and since it involved fate weaving, there needed to be participants to prove the spell worked. Because nothing says binding contract like group rituals under the moon. The process was elaborate and mystical in equal measure. After invoking Freya, the vulva would be escorted to a high seat by practitioners. The vulva would be undressed by female attendants while the sidemoder was prepared by males, because apparently Vikings believed in gender-segregated setups. Then came the main event. The group would enter trance together while participants, usually high-status shamans, would engage in acts, sometimes offering chants during the process. We're not talking about a quick spell. These witnesses would stay for the duration, sometimes joining for energy. But wait, it gets worse. In some cases, participants would actually examine the vulva afterward, looking for signs of success as proof the magic took. Imagine having to present your ritual to a committee of seers like you're submitting evidence in a saga, which technically you were. The most insane part. This wasn't just for elite vulvas. Any shamanic working involving fertility or war could require cedar sex, with sagas describing thousands of Vikings participating in these for victories. We're talking about groups trying to game the fates by having witnesses wait outside the hut. But even this wasn't always acceptable. Saga records show cases where spells were nullified because the ritual wasn't properly sexual, meaning the group had to do it again, this time with proper ecstasy. The practice was so normalized that Viking lore included instructions for proper cedar behavior, both for the vulva and participants. There were rules about positions, what to chant, and how long to last. Vikings turned shamanism into a formal erotic institution. Blown away? Subscribe for the full series. Think animal taboos are modern? Try Viking bestiality laws, where screwing livestock could cost your life. Welcome to beastly punishments, where privacy died and shame was eternal. The logic behind bestiality bans was straightforward in insane Viking way. Acts with animals weren't just sinful, they were and since laws protected honor, there needed to be witnesses to prove the deed. Because nothing says legally binding taboo like public accusations at thing. The process was elaborate and humiliating. After rumors, the accused would be examined by law speakers who would question under oath about the act, frequency, and details. But the real nightmare was the trial by ordeal. If inconclusive, the court could order public shaming. The sessions took place in assembly, with experts and officials watching for signs. The accused was given time to defend, and if proven, outlawry or death. Some tried to cheat by claiming curses. Saga records show cases where men were caught, leading to examinations. The most insane part, these trials could drag on with multiple attempts. Women faced humiliations too. The assumption was that bestiality was urgy. The social consequences were devastating. Win or lose, gossip. Some preferred outlawry rather than trial. Here's a fact that will, no text, blow your mind. Viking rape in raids wasn't just conquest, it was strategy, but home laws punished it harshly. In Danelaw, rape fined heavily. The business model was genius in hypocrisy. They couldn't condone rape, but canon allowed fines. Brothels under regulations. The financial arrangements exploitative. It was pyramid with victims at bottom. The most insane used profits for temples. Funding salvation with sin. The system entrenched. Reformers faced resistance. The empire lasted centuries, ending with Christianity. But for years, warriors ran operations making crime jealous. Viking birth control methods were so bizarre, dangerous, ineffective they make modern look miracle. Let's start with classics, animal parts. Women would wear weasel testicles. Logic since weasels promiscuous but small litters. But jewelry just beginning. Potions from beaver testicles, mercury. Some poison themselves. The sneezing method ridiculous. Physicians believed sneeze after sex expelled seed. Physical barriers insane. Insert honey, wool, dung. Some lemon cap, not ineffective but uncomfortable. Timing-based wrong info. Magical category own. Amulets, rituals, walk backwards around hall. Withdrawal existed, but warned caused madness. Viking people were sexually insane. They created society where funerals had orgies and church-like laws ran taboos. The approach to sex reveals human nature. Desperate enough, believe anything. Whether ritual magic, grooming for seduction, or court divorce proof points. If you made it this far, you're a legend. Subscribe, like, and comment your most shocking fact.